my name is Sheila and welcome to my channel, Seaside Snuggles Quilts, Patterns, and Crafts, where I focus mainly on quilts, but will craft anything that tickles my fancy. And what's tickling my fancy today is the windmill bag. Now this isn't a new pattern, this is just my method for doing this pattern. I've seen it quite often crocheted, but I really like this style of bag. I'm not a bag maker, but this gives me an opportunity to make something small. When you're making quilts, you're doing these big projects and sometimes they take a lot of time. You end up with a lot of scrap, orphan blocks, extra batting. This gives you an opportunity to use those things and make something useful. Also, I like this pattern so much that I have a lot of plans to make other bags using this method. So this video is going to be a foundational video, and I'll refer to it in the future when I make other styles of windmill bags. You might be wondering what happened to the medallion video. Well, that's coming still, but it is quite honestly eating my lunch and I really needed a break, and this is the perfect thing. And I hope it's a perfect break for you. I hope you'll join me. Let's get started. I almost forgot to tell you, this is the cute bag we're making. Okay, let's go. So what you're going to need for this project are 2 fat quarters and 3/4 of a yard of fabric for the liner, if you choose to do a liner, which we're going to do for this basic bag. So the cutting instructions are very important, and we're going to start by folding our fat quarter in half the long way. So this would be the 21 inch, this is the 18 inches on a fat quarter, and you want to fold it in half the long way, and you want to cut 4.5 inch strips. Now 4.5 inches is 4 times is exactly 18 inches. If you cannot get exactly, like if you're short a little bit on your fat quarter, just make sure that you cut them equally. Does that make sense? So I decided to do 4 times the speed over the places where I'm cutting. And here I'm just showing you how I'm going to cut those 4.5 inch strips from the first fat quarter. And I'm making sure that I aligned the hash marks with the fold side of the fat quarter so that I get straight cuts in the end. And then I'm going to make sure that each of the 4.5 inch strips that I've cut are the same length, so as close as I can get to the full 21 inches as possible. Alright, so we're done with our first fat quarter. Let's get our second fat quarter. This one's going to be a little more complicated. So this fat quarter we need to cut very specifically, and I'm going to start with zeroing this side. It looks like it's pretty straight, but remember, we're going to base what's 0 on the edge piece, and I like to get as close as I can. I don't want to waste anything and end up short 1/4 of an inch or something. That really drives me crazy. So I'm lining up with the fold, and you see how it's just a little off here? I do want to clean that up when you're zeroing. Okay, you're establishing what 0 is for the rest of your cuts. And for these, we need to cut 2.5 inch strips, 4 of them to start. And this is folded the same way as the other fat quarter so that we can get 21 inches or the widest part of your fat quarter. Here I'm continuing with my 2.5 inch strips until I have a total of 4 2.5 inch by 21 inch strips, and then I'm going to rotate what's remaining of my fat quarter, and I need to cut 2 sections that are 2.5 inches that I'll be cutting down to 6.5 inches later. I'm still going to use this fold that I was using originally, and I'm going to cut, I have a little bit cut out right here, which doesn't bother me at all. I'm actually going to cut on that side because I only need 13 inches total here, but I do need to zero this. See how it's not quite even? So I'm going to zero this end by lining up my fold. I'm going to slide over as much as I possibly can to straighten this out so that I have just the tiniest bit. And I know people say don't cut towards yourself. You shouldn't cut towards yourself. And I am over here and my blade is over here, so I'm okay. Thanks for your concern. I do appreciate it, but I'm a grown woman. All right, so we need another 2.5 inch strip from there. I'm going to separate this for a moment. And then I'm going to take my 2 strips that I've already cut and I'm just going to pile this on here. And I'm going to go to my smaller ruler. I'm going to cut 6.5, but this isn't straight, so I'm just going to cut a little more than 6.5, and then I'll straighten up that other end. Then I measure for real my 6.5, and I'm just using this line. If I use the edge, it's a little bit more difficult to see if I'm actually on the edge, but if I use a line, that makes it easier for my accuracy, I'll say. Get that little smidgen off. So I have 3 6.5 inch pieces here, and I need to cut one more from this 2.5 inch strip that now has a straight edge. 6.5. Ooh, I am on the wrong, I was gonna say that looks really long because I was on the wrong end of the ruler measuring 6.5. It happens, it happens. All right, so now I have 4 6.5 by 2.5 inch strips, 4 21 by 2.5 inch strips, and then with this piece that's left, I'm gonna cut 2 2-inch strips. Not much to say here, just using the fold again to cut 2 more strips that are 2 inches wide. Now we're also going to do the liner, so we're going to cut those pieces as well. Now I said 3/4 of a yard. This is not 3/4 of a yard. This is 24 inches, which is actually what you need, but asking for 24 inches of fabric at the fabric store may be weird. I don't know. Now I have this folded perpendicular to the selvages so that you get the full width of the fabric so that you can get these 24 inch, they're actually going to be 23.5 strips from this piece of fabric. These pieces need to be 6.5 inches wide. So they need to be 23 inches long. This is folded in half. Sorry, 23.5. Yes, 23.5 inches. Half of that is 11.75. So I'm going to try to line up my 11.75 here, and you see I'm right there. And 6.5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 by 23. So 23.5 is going to be 11.75 of an inch. This way, folded in half. All right, let's go. So I need 4 of these. Okay, same thing here. The only differences are that we're cutting 6.5 inch wide strips and that the fold is on the bottom, so that's where I'm aligning my ruler. All right, so those are my 4 cuts that are 6.5, and we also need 2 cuts that are 1.5. Last but not least, I want to make all of these even. So I'm just gonna trim them down to my absolute shortest piece, and that way they will all be the same. And again, this is the liner, so if it's just a smidge small, that is absolutely fine. Just double checking from the fold that I have 11 3/4 inch. And now let's gather all of our pieces, and we're going to start assembling the individual panels for the outside of the bag. So you'll need your 4.5-inch pieces, your long 2.5-inch pieces, your short 2.5-inch pieces, and we're going to place the pieces, the long 2.5-inch pieces, to the left sides of each of the 4.5-inch pieces. Now let's go sew. Alright, and I'm going to do a 1/4-inch seam allowance here. Okay. So let's get these ironed and trimmed. So here's a little ironing hack that I use to sew multiple blocks at a time so I can move on to the next step. You can see the stitches on all of these seams. Then I'm going to just spritz the whole thing with some water. Spritz the whole thing with water. Now I'm going to flip up all but the last one. I'm going to finger press, and then I'm going to press this bottom one. And I'm not going to take too long on it because it's going to get more heat. And I'm going to take this one, flip it up, smooth it out with my fingers. Now I have the heat from that bottom one warming it up from underneath. I have the water relaxing it. And it's going to get a second press on that bottom while I do the first press on the top. Next. And I'm picking this up and moving it. I'm not sliding it across so much because I don't want to warp my fabric. It's pretty malleable when it's wet. And here's my last one. I'm gonna fold that. I'm gonna iron this as well. And so as I'm ironing the top ones, the bottom ones are getting pressed several more times. And they've already been pressed once, so individually. So they are nice and crisp. But if you feel like you want to hit that bottom one again, you can just flip the stack over and press from the back. Make sure nothing's folded when you do that flip. I'm going to iron this part as well because I have those folds that I kind of want to get out. Alright, so those are my 4 pieces pressed. And now I'm going to trim all of them. And I'm going to kind of do the same thing. I'm just going to, see my stack is still together. I'm just going to flip this over and square these off. So I'm making sure that I'm lined up with the edge, but I also want to make sure that one of my hash marks is lined up with this seam, and that will help to keep me perpendicular to that seam with this cut. Now that we have those panels sewn and pressed, rotate them so that the accent strip is at the top. We're going to now attach the 6.5-inch pieces to the right hand side of each piece with it right side up. And I didn't trim that far in, so you might want to make sure that it's straight. And I'm going to sew with the short piece on the bottom because my seam allowance is facing towards me that way, and I just find it easier, but do it however you need to do it. See how I don't have to, fiddle with the seam allowance? So once all of those are sewn, we're going to use the ironing hack again. The only difference this time is we have two seams that we want to stagger. So as I lay these down, I'm going to lay down the seam that I'm going to press on the right hand side, and the seams that I've already pressed, I'm going to still stagger from top to bottom. So it's going to be kind of staggered diagonally down and to the left. That way I don't get any of my previously ironed lines misshapen, and I can effectively iron the 6.5-inch sides. Other than that, it's going to be done the exact same way. I'm going to use my mister and just mist those ends where I can see the stitches. That's how I have it staggered, so that I can see the stitches. I'm just tapping it to kind of press the liquid into the fabric, and then I'm ironing it just like I did before. So here I have some scrap batting that I've cut off of quilts that I made before. You just want to make sure that you get all of the threads and lint or what have you off of there so it doesn't show through your fabric if you're using light colored fabric. And I'm placing this first piece so that it is on the more crooked side. You're going to need a couple pieces of batting, which is optional, for your strap. And so for these pieces that are a little larger, I want to leave the straight edge intact so that I'll have an easier time measuring for my strap pieces. And I'm cutting these pieces about 1/8 of an inch longer than the panel because we're going to be cutting it back anyway. So it can be the exact same size as the panel. It can even be about 1/2 an inch smaller than the panel because like I said, we're going to be cutting it back. And that second piece, I left a piece for the straps. We only have 2 straps, so these other pieces, fortunately, I had enough that I didn't need 4 more straps. Alright, see how it just fits? It could actually be a little bit smaller than this and still be usable because we're going to be cutting it back about a 1/4 of an inch to get some of the bulk out of the seams. Alright, so now we have all of these paired up with our batting. I'm going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away. I'm going to top stitch right on top of this solid color. You could stitch in the ditch if you want to. You could quilt this if you want to. The only thing that you need to remember is if you're going to just quilt it with free motion quilting, then go ahead and stitch 3/8 of an inch around the outside first, and then when you quilt it, you'll have that boundary to know to keep yourself inside of that 3/8 of an inch, because we're going to be cutting back this batting to that stitch line, and you don't want to have to pick all that out. So I'm just going to stitch the 3/8 of an inch here, and then 1/8 of an inch here, and then I'm going to stitch 3/8 of an inch all the way around the outside, and so we can just move on to the next part. But this would be a great opportunity to maybe quilt in this accent, free motion quilt in this accent, or whatever. On this panel, I'm starting with the top stitching, and I'm stitching 1/8 of an inch onto the accent side of the panel. And once I get to the end, I'm going to rotate and start stitching 3/8 of an inch from the edge of the panel all the way around the outside. And see there how I just sewed off the edge, I'm just going to pick back those few stitches. So it's not a big deal, so don't worry about it if you do. And it's as easy as that. Now we're going to remove the batting from each of the 4 pieces. For this part, I'm going to use my cutting mat, even though I used my scissors to cut the batting pieces before. I like to use my scissors as much as possible when dealing with the batting so I don't get batting into the self-sealing portion of the mat. But when I do need to use the mat, I like to use the back side of the mat, so that's what I'm doing here. Also, when I cut, I don't want to use a maximum pressure because that's what will push the fibers into the self-healing part of the mat. So just make sure that you cut delicately, is that what I want to say? You can use a lint roller to try to get some of that stuff out of your mat, but if you just cut a little gently and use the back side of your mat, it will help to keep some of those fibers out of the self-healing portion. So what we're going to do, you notice that I folded up the fabric, I stuck my ruler into the fold and then tilted it over to push the fabric out of the way, and then I'm making a cut 1/8 of an inch away from the seam line. So here we go again. Tilt the ruler, measure 1/8 from the stitch line, and then go ahead and cut that excess away. And you're going to work your way all the way around each panel, cutting back the batting this way. If you have a part where you have some stitches, just pluck those out so that you can bend the fabric over. And then proceed as you did for the other side. Remember to save a couple of pieces for your straps if you would like to use them in your straps. That's optional. But when I cut these pieces, I kind of cut away from the piece at the end of the cut, and I had to remember not to inadvertently cut the larger pieces that I need later. I would have not had them for my straps, so just keep that in mind. And I'm sorry I keep going back and forth here with voiceover and sound, but you might have noticed with my last video I had a lot of problems with sound, and so I had a lot of problems with this one. I think that I've got maybe one more video that I'm going to use my natural voice, I guess, my current time voice, but it's just such a hassle. It's easier for me to voice over after I get things done. So this is what the panel looks like on the back after you get all of the batting, and I'm going to let Real-Time Sheila take it from here with how to position the panels to sew. So this batting is not the same batting, but it's fine. This is a fun bag. So we're going to put these pieces together, and this is how we're going to do it. So I've got this cross, this upside down L. It's been rotated, right? No, it's been flipped. It's upside down L. And then we're going to take this one, which is exactly the same. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees. And these two pieces are going to go together like this. So I'm going to flip this on top of this one. Line up my fabric edges. Line up this corner. And I'm going to put some pins in. To hold it. And I like to pin on my mat so that I don't catch fabric on my table. Then we're going to take our ruler and we're going to measure 1/2 of an inch from the top of this piece. So I'm gonna like have my ruler off to the side a little bit. Can you see that? I have my ruler off to the side a little bit and lined up actually with my 3/4 inch line. And I'm going to use this 1/2 inch mark, and I'm gonna put a pin in right at that 1/2 inch mark because I need to not stitch above that pin. I'm just gonna stitch down and off. Make sure that I'm lined up down here. Okay, I'm going to start at the pin and I'm stitched down and off. So I'm using my hand wheel to get myself on my side of this pin. Then I'm going to pull the pin out, lower my presser foot. I'm going to keep this right on top of this line. I'm going to stitch forward 2 or 3 stitches and then back 2 or 3, and then we're going to stitch all the way down and off. Okay, so we're all sewn up, and you should have a little tab at the top here where we started our seam 1/2 inch from the top. Okay, so I like to stitch my seams open at this point. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open this up and flip it over, keeping it, the truck is very loud, keeping my seam allowance open under there, seeing where I stopped. I'm going to put a pin in right there because I don't want to go past there, but I'm going to top stitch here and here just to keep this open. Making sure it stays open here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. So I'm going to give it a little back tack. So just off the side, and that will help to keep this open. So I'm going to rotate this around and get the other side. We need to remember to stop where the other side started and give that a little back tack. I have my top stitch there, and this is what it looks like on the back. This is still open. You want to do that to the other side as well. See that these 2 pieces are the same. And what we're going to do is we're going to orient it this way, and then we're going to take this piece and we're going to rotate it 180 degrees, and we're going to line up those seams. Okay, we're going to sew this to this. We're going to line this up, and that will inform us as to how to sew the rest of it. So I'm going to get myself through this center seam, through that center seam, make sure it's lined up, and back up. Okay, then I'm going to get this oriented to sew. And it looks weird, but trust the process. All right, so now what we're going to do is we have this centered. We're just going to smooth this out and line up these 2 edges above the pin. Let's get our ruler. We want to measure 1/2 inch from the top. We want to stick a pin in there crossways. That is our do not cross line. And I'm going to put some pieces in here to keep our fabric aligned. Got a snag on my nail here. And then we're going to do the same thing on, oh, sorry about that, underneath the pin. So we're going to line up our fabric. I'm going to go ahead and continue down this way. And then you're going to have to peek a little bit to see where the edge of this one is. You can see over here as well. There's my 1/2 inch. So I'm going to put a pin right here to tell me to stop sewing right there. So I'm going to stitch down using a 1/2 inch seam allowance from this pin to this pin, making sure I pull this pin out as I go. Let's go to the machine. So same method as before. I'm going to use this as my line to get me another 1/8 inch over, using my hand wheel to get my needle down. Then I can pull that pin out, and I'm going to go forward 2 or 3 stitches, go back to the same number if I can, and here we go. Okay, I'm going to approach this slowly, take that pin out, continue. Gonna sneak up and get one more stitch in there, then I'm going to back tack. And I'm going to cut. Okay, so now I can take all of these pins out. And let's see what we have here. We have a windmill, right? That's why this is called a windmill. So now what I want to do is I need to top stitch this seam the way I did this one. So I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to open this up. And is my iron still hot? It's not. I'm going to heat it up. We're going to press this a little bit to try to keep it from opening up, from rolling over, I should say. And I am using cotton batting, 100% cotton batting, so I'm not worried about this heat, but if you're using polyester batting, just be careful to only use the edge of your iron right on the fabric and try to avoid getting it on your batting. Now, flip this back over, and I'm going to put a pin across here, which both holds my seam allowances open and marks where I need to stop stitching. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom here. So where that opening is where I want the pin to go, so I know to stop stitching. And then I'm just going to put a couple of pins across here so that stays open where the seams are a little stiff. And maybe halfway, just to keep those seams open as I top stitch. Now if I had the same color in my bobbin thread, I would just sew from the other side probably, but I don't. So this is what it looks like from the back, just holding the seam allowance open so that I can top stitch from the right side of the fabric. Also, this is kind of weird. So what I do is this long side that's going to be in the throat of my machine, I'm just going to roll it up to get it out of the way. And then I'm good to go. So same thing as before. I'm going to use the hand wheel to get my needle placed. I'm going to take out this first pin. This one's going to be a little slower going because we're going to be going across some pins. And I do want to back tack this only because I don't want it coming loose. Not that it's holding the back together or anything. I just don't want it to end up being just loose threads later. This. Hopefully my seam allowance will stay open, even though the pin's not there anymore. I'm just going to jump across. Start here, pull this thread across, and then I can really see, right? Alright, so now our seams have been pressed down and should stay flat. I'm going to go in and I'm going to trim some of these extra threads. Alright, now what we're going to do is we're going to sew our lining pieces together, and we're going to do them the same but opposite. Don't you hate when someone says that? We're going to do the same but the opposite. So we're going to lay these out, but instead of laying them right side up like we did with the outside of the bag, we're going to lay these right side down, but we're going to sew them together in the same way. We're going to use 1/2 inch seam allowances. We're going to sew these two together this way. And like that. Let's get these pinned together as well. So I'm going to put some pins in here. This one we're going to sew off the edge, off the edge, and we're going to stop at the 1/2 inch mark. So let's get my ruler, put my 1/2 inch mark there, and I'm going to give myself a pin where I need to stop. This is about 1/2 inch. I'm going to back tack here at the end. Okay, we're going to stop, back tack. They're going to go together like this. So this piece is going to be on top, so I'm going to press these to the left so that my seam allowances are pushed into each other when my presser foot comes down this way. So this one is going to go to the right. You could open these as well if you want to. So I'm going to nest these seams. Pin down the middle. And again, with this lining, I've just got fabric here, so I could just mark with a pen, with a writing pen, heat erasable, or a pencil where the 1/2 inch mark is. So we're going to pin, 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 and that is to keep my sides lined up. Pin, pin, dear. There we go. And this time, if I don't want to put a pin in there, I could just use a pencil and line it up with the edge of my fabric here and mark my 1/2 inch stop line there, and same thing here. 1/2 inch, mark there, and now I can just sew. So from this point, both pieces, the liner and the that is not over 1/2 inch yet. Both the liner and the outer part of the bags are going to be put together the same way from this point. And it's easier to see on the liner, so we're going to continue with the liner from this point before we move on to the outside of the bag. Right, now here's what we need to do. See where your seam stops? You need to take your scissors and you need to clip on the long piece of fabric towards where that seam stops, to about 1/8 of an inch away. So see that? Just want to give that a clip, and you want to do that in all 4 locations. So you can see it here just by folding it back. See where it connects. Clip. All right, so we have all 4 of those clipped, and here's why. We want to put our liner right side up, and then we want to take the long piece here and we want to fold it over and match up these 2 sides. So you might want to pick it up and shake it out so that this ends up being folded on a 45, and you want to just rotate it until the bottom fabric is flat and the top piece can line up with the edge. So there's a little fold under here. You want to make sure that your fabric is folded out of the way, and I like to put a little pin right where those stitches end to make sure that I'm not folded there. I'm not, up under where I'm going to sew. You're going to start stitching at these stitches. So as long as everything is out of the way there, you're going to be good to go. So we're going to line this up. All right, so I've pinned all the way to the end, and we're going to sew all the way to the end. You can put a little mark on the top so you know where that is if you need to. So we're going to do this side, but we're also going to do the opposite side. So now I'm going to rotate it around to these 2 pieces that are loose. I'm going to lay this piece flat, and I'm going to rotate this piece around so that the edges meet. Give it a little shake out so that my seams can come together. All right, so this is folded nicely back there. I'm going to make sure that that point is not like wrinkly, because that kind of tells you that it's not lined up right. Okay, I'm going to put a pin in right here. And I'm going to get the rest of this lined up, and we're going to pin down this side. So this is what it looks like, which is strange, but we're going to sew this all the way to the end of the fabric. And let me give myself a little mark here so I know where that is. And we're going to sew the other side as well to the end of the fabric. Let's go do that. So we're going to start our stitches. We're still using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So make sure that you are properly positioned, and I'm using my hand wheel to kind of get myself aligned. Pull this pin out and drop my presser foot. And I'm not quite over a 1/2 inch. There we go. There we go. So, because it's got to be an 1/8 inch off of this edge. So now we're going to sew all the way till the end of the fabric, but we're going to back stitch here. Here we go. Well, I certainly didn't mean to do that, but I left it in to show that everybody picks. All right, let's get back to it. All right, let's take these pins out and see what craziness we have going on right now, because it does look crazy. It does, I know. All right, so when we open these seams, I'm going to go ahead and press right into this corner here. So I want my iron to be able to be flat. All right, so we've pressed these two seam lines. They look pretty good. If I had pressed this way, I would have this seam, which will help me later. But all I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to clip it. And I'm just going to clip the longer side. Clip it so that it's even with the top of your other piece, so that this can lay this way. So when I sew my pieces together and I'm coming in with my 1/2 inch seam allowance across the top, I can go all the way down this way and then this way. Okay? One also. So this looks wild, right? But if I stick my hands in here, you can kind of see where it's made part of a bottom. I've got one of my corners here. That reminds me. Go ahead and clip this as well. You don't have to clip it super close because you don't want to accidentally get in there. But go ahead and clip this corner so that you don't have bulk in the corners. Now we're going to do the same thing with the opposite corners, opposite sides, seams. Same thing. We're going to line these up so that the short side is flat, and then you're rotating the long side around and give it a little shake out so that this triangle can be formed. I hope you can see how I'm doing this here. You want to line up these two sides. I'll put a pin in right here. Then you can pin this whole side. Let's sew this side, and then we'll do the last side, which needs a little bit of special treatment. Let's take these pins out. I'm going to stick my iron in here and give this a little bit of a press. So there's one side that's going to be left. So I'm going to clip this right now just to the stitches so that that can stay flat, and iron the rest of this. And I'm getting inside the bag into the corner. All right, I need to clip this corner that I just stitched. And now we have one more side to do. And it seems really weird, I know, but we're going to do the same thing with one caveat, and that caveat is that we're going to leave an opening to turn our bag out through later. So let's get this lined up and flat, and make sure that the corner is not going to be stitched over. So we're pulling it out. We're pulling out this fold to the left so it doesn't get stitched over, and then we're putting a pin in to keep it from getting up under there. Hope you could see that. Okay. And it's going to be weird right now, but you want to line up the edge the way you did before. And you want to come up about, I don't know, 4 inches, 5 inches, something in there, and put a pin in that way to stop you from stitching. Then you want to give yourself 4 or 5 inches before you start again. And that's where your bag is going to be turned out of. So match that. Okay, I'm going to give myself a little mark again where that fabric ends. So this time we're going to start stitching here, we're going to stop here, back tack, get here, back tack, finish out, back tack. Okay, let's go to the machine. Using my hand wheel, press your foot down, stitch a little bit forward, a little bit back. Make sure nothing is up under there. Sorry for hitting the camera. Okay, so I've got to my first pin. I'm going to back tack. Keep my threads. And I'm going to move up here. Get myself positioned again. It's not an exact science, so just get yourself in the vicinity of the pin. Make sure there's nothing underneath there. Make sure that you're still at 1/2 inch. Forward, backward, and then we'll finish the seam. I'm going to go ahead and cut the corner, just trim it back. Then I'm going to fold this back just so that it has a straight reference when I go to close this seam. So I'm just taking it from seam to seam. other side under as well. So I'm not just trying to find where the stitch line is there. Okay, and then I'm going to, on either side of that opening, I'm going to give a little clip to the opening, and that way the rest of the seam can lay however it needs to lay, and I'm going to lay it in the same direction as all the other seams. And I'm going to have to stick my iron in here to do this. Okay, seam at the bottom down to the corner. Okay, now let's turn this right side out and see what it looks like. Pushing my corners out. Here's my hole to pass the bag through. And this is the bag we've made so far. Now it's hard to tell with this solid liner fabric, but we've created diagonal lines here. We've created a top. We've clipped, oh, we did not clip this one. Let's clip this one as well. That was the last one we did. That allows this to lay flat. Okay, so we have a square bottom bag. This is the bottom. This is the hole where it's going to pass through, and I'm going to give it a press this way. And this way. Okay, so this is the bag. We're going to sew the outside together the exact same way, except we're going to close all of the sides. So let's do that. Here's our outside windmill. We've already clipped that corner, on this side anyway. We're going to lay that short side flat. We opened up the seam though, so we're going to let that stay folded. I'm going to lay this flat, and those first two are pretty easy. So we're going to keep that corner out of the way. Pin the first side just like you did the liner all the way to the end of the fabric we're going to sew to, and then we're going to do the second side. I forgot to clip that little piece of fabric there. Same way. Let's go sew these 1/2 inch seam allowance. You do want to press the seam open on the outside of the bag since the batting adds bulk. But I would not worry about top stitching this on your first bag. It's really not necessary. Just give it a good press. We're going to go ahead and clip this corner as well. Not too close. Okay, let's get the other side. I think this might be a little bit difficult to do if you're using polyester batting, but just use the tip of the iron so that you minimize the contact with the polyester. Okay, let's clip this. Alright, so let's look at how it looks so far. Pretty swank. Alright, so now we need to do the other two sides. Just want to make sure everything is turned out. I need to give myself a clip here on the long side, right towards the where the stitches stop. Make sure that bottom piece is flat. And I really clipped into that a lot. I'm going to have to make sure that my stitches really come in there. I clipped that too aggressively. So I got to be very careful and make sure that my stitches come all the way over there. Okay, now we're going to put this together. Not just yet. I am going to snip this right here. Okay, now we're going to put this together. So give this a snip, not as drastic as what I just did. Give it a shake. And you want to get this over as much as you can, but don't like make it buckle or anything. Just as much as you can. Put a pin in, then line up the rest of it. It'll be fine. So you see how long this is already. With me doing this as a foundational, say, video, I won't have to have all of these parts in the videos when I make something fancier. So let's go sew this. We have everything sewn together. We need to press these seam allowances open. You don't need to watch me do that. I'll do that off camera. And then we will flip it right side out and bag our bags. Now I'm going to turn it right side out. Let's make sure I got all these clipped. And we'll take a look at what we've got going. Cute, isn't it cute? Isn't it cute? I really think these bags are just so adorable. So, poking out all my corners. Looks nice, and I want to iron this, of course, from the outside as well. This part here is again where we can clip, just so that this can lay however it wants to lay. Remember, I have this seam open on the inside, so that clip is necessary right there. Alright, so now that I've got all those seams pressed, I'm going to do this pressing part. So this is what the bottom of our bag looks like. And I just want to give this a press. Press it the other way as well. We're just doing a tote here. We're not putting any zippers or pockets or anything like that. This is going to be super basic tote bag for this iteration. So happy. So cute. Don't you think? All right, so there is our outside of our bag. Here's our inside of our bag, and we want to put the right sides together, so we're going to turn this back inside out, and we're going to bag this bag into this bag. So I'm just going to keep my opening there on top. Let's get that a little press. And that's where we cut it open. So we're going to orient this so that we have this, what looks like, it always looks like the top of a dress to me right there. So we want to do the same thing with this part, like this. And you see that our directions are the same because of the way we put it together. Now I'm going to stick this bag into this bag. And I want to match up the points first. And my pins. So this is my first point. And I'm just going to match it up like this. Match up my second point. So we've got 4 points that we're going to match up. Then after we get the points, the mountains, we're going to get the valleys. So I'm going to come back in and we're going to match this up. So our clipped sides are together, and I'm going to pin right in the valley like this. That pin is terrible. So same thing, I'm matching up my clipped edges and my seam. Alright, so we've got all of our mountains, we've got all of our valleys, and now we're going to get these seams. And you do want to pin on the inside. So I'm just going to pin like this, at these edges. Pin like this. That's okay. Alright, so everything looks like it's better now. We have excess fabric here for some reason that I cannot figure out, but we've got it pinned so that it's going to fit correctly. So we're going to now go sew a 1/2 inch in all the way around. When you get to these valleys, you need to pivot. You can't go beyond the end of the stitches. So what I recommend that you do is you measure a 1/2 inch and put the pin that's going to stop you right at the 1/2 inch mark. And it's going to be 1/2 inch from this edge. So yeah, I need to go in about 1/8 of an inch. It's a little bit too much. There we go. So mark your pins so that they stop you on these inside pieces, and then don't go beyond that. So when you stitch down this side, 1/2 inch should put you in line with this. Then you're going to continue 1/2 inch, and then you should be in 1/2 inch here. This is a bad corner as an example, but this is your edge for the 1/2 inch. So you should be down here 1/2 inch and then come up this way. So we want to check all of our valleys before we move on. We want to get them the 1/2 inch mark. Some pin that will need to stop with our needle down and pivot right there. Don't go any further, because that will get you messed up. If you do, you're going to pick it out to 1/2 inch. Okay, just remember that. So these are my stop sewing pins. All right, so I've got 4 of those in. We're ready to go to the machine. So I'm going to start at this weird point. Actually, I'm not, because then I lock it in, don't I? I'm going to start at the point after the weird point at the 1/2 inch mark, which is 1/8 of an inch beyond this. And I'm going to drop my foot, and I'm going to keep that pin in. I can't keep that pin in because I'm running over. I got to remember that. So here's my 1/2 inch. Here's my 1/2 inch. I'm going to sew and I'm going to back tack, but I'm going to make sure that I don't go. Now here at the outside, you can stitch right off. Okay. Let's do the next side. String cut here. Okay. We're just going to rotate the bag around and continue. Now we're coming up on our V, so I'm going to take that pin out and continue to hold it. And we're going to stop right there and pivot. Okay, we're ready for the next line. For this one, again, we can stitch right off. Let's take this pin out. Rotate it again. We're here, step to 1/2 inch. And so, make sure the still good. Take this pin out. This is my stop pin. Make sure nothing's up under there. Rotating our bag again. See that bag flat there? All around. Take this pin out. This is my stop pin. One more side. Alright, so we don't have the stop pin, but we do have where our stitches should stop based on where they started. More stitch. I'm going to just rotate and connect my stitches. Alright, so we can take this extra fabric out. Let's go to the other camera. And I'm just going to use my scissors, and we're going to take this extra piece of fabric out here that was length that we didn't need. And we're going to clip from this side into the V, and I'm going to make 2 clips. I'm going to clip right there, and I'm going to clip right. And this is the last one we're going to clip. I'm going to spend a little time with my baby, and then I'll come back and show you how to make the handle and sew that in, and then we'll be all done. Would you believe that I lost my sound again? So part of this is going to be voiced over. I hope you can hear me. This is where we're starting the straps to the purse, and we have our 2-inch strips and our 1.5-inch strips. The 2-inch strips are of our accent fabric from the outside, and the 1.5-inch strips are from the liner. You'll notice there are different sizes, and I start by sewing one side to, well, matching one side. And then I'm going to finger press towards the accent fabric, which is the fabric I want to show on the outside of the strap. And I'm not going to get the heat iron on it just yet. I'm just going to finger press because that makes it easier to match the opposite sides after it's finger pressed, since they're not the same size. So it's just a finger press. I use my fingernail a little bit, and make sure that you do both of them. And then it's a little easier to match those edges right there. And once you have it at the machine, you're just going to sew it like any other regular old strap. Just that you're going to have a little bubble there where the accent piece is bigger than the liner. And you need to turn that right side out. Next, we're going to press our seams, and we're going to use a method that I used watching Donna Jordan at Jordan Fabrics make some pillows. And she irons the seams open first before she presses them towards the outside. And of course, this is going to be most effective where the top and bottom piece are the same size, but it also works pretty well here so that you can get an even press with just the same amount of accent fabric showing on both sides. And instead of just sewing the batting in, I decided to cut the batting to size. So I measured the strap first. It's about 1 inch that you're going to have in there. And then I'm going to use my little tool that flips my tubes out to pull the batting through the tube. And I stick it all the way through the batting, wrap it around so I don't lose the grip on it, and then I pull it through, making sure that it's flat as I pull it in. That's why I'm kind of using my hand to keep it flat. Then I'm going to smooth everything out, give it a trim, and then we'll take it to the sewing machine to top stitch it. So to top stitch it, you can do it any way that you like. I decided to top stitch at about 1/8 of an inch and then go back in and get it at about 1/4 of an inch so that I had double stitching on the outside, like on the two outside edges of the strap. And I like the way that looks a lot. But you can do it any way that you choose. Just make sure that you are sewing the batting down inside the tube. So this is how my two straps turned out. They're very strong. They feel very sturdy. And now we're going to put them in our bag. So I'm going to say right now that I should have cut these pieces a little bit smaller than I did. Where I mark it, it still works out. So you can still use this method, but a better method would be to make this measurement here. And what I'm measuring is the width of the strap to the two stitch lines that are actually holding the liner and the bag together. So right there is really what we're after. But what I should have done is moved the cut up 1/2 of an inch. You know what I'm saying? So I actually cut it at the bottom of the strap, but I should have cut it about 1/2 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch higher so that my triangles would come in smoothly to the handles. So I kind of fix this later, and I'll point it out when I do. But my stitch length was a little long, so when I went to put my straps in, I actually pulled my seams apart a little bit. And because I had to fix that anyway, I just brought the angle in to meet the strap a little better. You know what I'm saying? So, here's very important. When you put the strap in, make sure that you match the liner side of the strap to the liner side of the bag. Then ensure when you pull the second end out of the bag that side remains up. You don't want to twist your handle at all. Okay, so the liner side, which is the green side in my case, should stay up the entire time, even though you can't see it inside the bag there. That's what I'm doing with my hand, making sure it stays flat. And then when you pull it out, you should see the liner side on both little tips of the handle, like you see here. So I put the other handle in the exact same way. I just had to reach around from that hole. And here I'm sewing the handles in. My first adjustment was to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance instead of a 1/2 inch seam allowance because I cut it a little too deep. So if you find that you do the same thing, that was the correction. And then here's the second correction, is when I go to sew, reattach those diagonal pieces, I'm kind of bringing it in towards the strap so it's a smooth transition. After I do that, I go back in and I'm going to sew over the strap several times to secure it. I think I go over this like 6 times back and forth. My backward stitch is very slow, so for the other stitches I just cut the thread and sew back over it forward again instead of going back and forth. But either way works fine. Do what works best for you. I apologize, but I did not record myself flipping the bag inside out. It's standard fare, but you want to flip the bag inside out and make sure that you iron very carefully in the V parts of the bag. They're going to look a little wonky when you first turn it inside out, but just work that with the iron until you get it nice and flat. Last but not least, we're going to give this a nice top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around, being careful to keep our stitches as straight as we can, keep the outside of the bag kind of rolled so that you don't see the inner liner as you're top stitching. That's what I'm looking for here, just making sure that it's not peeking out. I guess that wasn't the very last thing. Actually, the last thing is going to be to close your liner on the inside. I didn't do anything fancy. I just put the 2 sides of the open liner together and I top stitched very close to the edge, again about 1/8 of an inch, and back tacked on each end, and that was it. So that will complete our bag. Let's go talk about it at the design wall. Well, that was it. Thank you so much for joining me. I know that video is very long. I cut that down from 3 hours, believe it or not. I do apologize for not getting my turning out of the bag, but it's just like turning out any other bag. The only thing that you need to watch is right in these little dips here. You need to use your iron to really smooth that out. Make sure that your clip is very close to the threads without cutting through the threads. And because remember, you didn't back tack it all there, it's just a pivot right there. And just use the iron to just really get that flat before you top stitch. Okay, this is the bag and it is full of jelly rolls, and I wanted to show you the capacity of the bag just so that you know, and the size relative to a human. Let me show you what's in this bag. 1 jelly roll, 2 jelly rolls, 3 jelly rolls, 4 jelly rolls, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, ooh, is that all? 11, and 12. I got still holding over. So these are all the jelly rolls that were in this cute little bag. The way we did the handles makes it very sturdy, strong, able to hold this weight easily. And because of the way it's constructed, it's easily foldable and storable. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you like the bag. I hope you'll give it a try. This is just a jumping off point. We're going to be making a lot of things in the future based on this general design. So I hope you'll join me. Thank you so much for all the subscribers. You guys are amazing. I can't wait to see you in the next video. Oh, the medallion is coming. It is coming. All right. See you later. Bye.